I'm John Batchelor, my colleague and co-host Thaddeus McCutter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes, and we're going sailing with Claudia Rosett of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, writing most recently in Forbes.com of a mystery. The ship is the Azargun, which is an Iranian ship roundabout. It's been renamed and reflagged several times. It is now somewhere near the Gulf, the Persian Gulf. But Claudia tells a story in Forbes that is a fascination because it combines the claims of the Obama administration at leveling the Iranian economy with severe sanctions these last years, and also the transformation of those sanctions into what at this point is the mystery. Is anybody paying attention in Washington? Claudia, very good evening to you. The Azargun, what is it? What does it look like? And how is it connected to Iran? Good evening to you.
Good evening, John. The Azargun is a nice-looking and relatively new, 12 years old container ship, which was built for Iran's main merchant fleet, the Islamic Republic of Iran shipping lines, IRISL, and served them under the Iranian flag. And then when U.S. sanctions were imposed on this main merchant carrier of Iran, IRISL, the Azargun embarked on this journey through different names and different flags, which is how Iran has tried for years to mask the identities of ships that are on the U.S. sanctions blacklist. This is one that's been on that list since 2008.
Detail, Claudia. How do you know what the ship is? It can change its name. It can change its owners. It can have many flags. Is there one identity that stays with that ship, like, say, the color of blue eyes and fingerprints?
Yeah, there's one number that stays with the ship, and that is the number on its hull number, called the IMO number, issued by the under authority of the International Maritime Organization for the life of each ship. So there's a 7-digit number that identifies the ship. But the name can change, the flag can change, the paint can change, and the cargo, John, can change. And that's one of the mysteries here.
So Azargun has been called Armis, and it's been under a Tanzanian flag. It's been called Atandis, and it was under another flag. It's been under all these flags. Did that fool Treasury ever?
Well, no, because Treasury pursued these ships very vigorously. For a couple of years after sanctions were imposed. Treasury officials went globetrotting around the world telling countries, please shun the ships that the U.S. has blacklisted as belonging to Iran. Even though they have front company owners in places like Panama, they're flagged at places like Barbados, which is the case with this ship. They're reflagged to Tanzania, they're renamed, and so on. Please keep an eye on that hull number and shun this ship. And that was the case until about 2 years ago, John, sort of coinciding with the back-channel Iran nuclear talks and then the official Iran nuclear talk agreement. And officially, U.S. sanctions are still in place, and the Obama administration says it is committed to enforcing them. But what's going on in reality, if you look at what the data and ship tracking databases and what you can see of where these ships are showing up, is it's very hard to discern sanctions on these ships anymore. They are calling at places, this Azargun has just called it Venezuela. And right now it is heading pedal to the metal. It's passed through the Suez Canal, flying the Iranian flag on the U.S. sanctions blacklist. And it has rounded Yemen. It's currently off Oman, heading for the Iranian home port of Bandar Abbas. Is this a ship under sanctions or what? Venezuela is a country where it should really worry us when an Iranian ship makes a port call and then barrels for home. Although apparently the administration is not really worried. I queried State and Treasury about this when this ship was just off Venezuela a few weeks ago, and Treasury wouldn't comment at all. State said in this sort of remarkable locution, quote, "We are not aware of any sanctions that have been triggered by this specific port call."
Thaddeus?
Claudia, isn't this just another example of Iran testing how far they can get with this administration? Because clearly the Iranian regime knows that this administration is going to bend over, twist, do whatever it takes to get some type of shabby deal with that regime.
That appears to be what's going on. That while officially there are sanctions still in place, there are also a whole list of confidential waivers, exemptions that the administration will not tell us about. They won't give us the details of who's really benefiting from these. And it's very hard to know. And what we see is it's not just this ship. The Rosett merchant fleet of Iran, which was hiding behind flags from Tanzania, from all over the place, Hong Kong at one point.
You say there are 112 ships in the fleet?
There are 117 that are on the U.S. blacklist,
I see.
the Treasury OFAC U.S. blacklist. Of those, 112 now show as having been reflagged back to Iran. In other words, Iran is now sailing, and they're active. They're sailing around to the Middle East, Africa.
To do what,
coast of
Claudia?
Africa.
Claudia, who are Venezuela. You also mentioned in your story Libya during the Troubles. Are these ships for contraband? Are these pirate ships? Are these smuggling ships? Do we know?
That's the big question, John. What are they carrying? Because Rosett was put under U.S. sanctions for its services as a carrier, basically, to Iran's military complex, especially its ballistic missile program. And Rosett ships have been caught in the past smuggling weapons. And in fact, this particular ship was accused by a watchdog group in New York, United Against Nuclear Iran, in 2013, of stopping off Yemen, turning off its onboard signaling system, and engaging in illicit ship-to-ship transfers. We don't know of what, but probably it wasn't, oatmeal. And this is a ship that's just spent quite some time at ports of Venezuela, a place that is Iran's closest ally in the Western Hemisphere, a place that produces uranium ore, a place that harbors Hezbollah, Iran's major mascot terrorist group, a place of many where the U.S. has targeted sanctions on Venezuela, its individuals there in their own right, and in other words, that's a worrisome port call. And that Iran is now doing this with apparent impunity under its own flag. It's not even having to hide. And state is saying, well, we don't see anything here that would cause us to be concerned. That should cause us to be concerned.
Thaddeus?
Claudia, isn't this one of the instances where the difference between the Iranian regime and the administration, the P5+1, they're saying that they want the sanctions immediately removed. The president's saying, no, we can't do that. They must be phased in. Isn't this really kind of a guileful attempt by the administration to show the Iranian regime that it doesn't matter when the sanctions are removed if they're not going to be enforced when they're in existence now?
That is precisely the point. That's just what's going on here. It's a de facto lifting of sanctions. Officially, they're still in place. But if you look at the behavior, and it's not just this ship, it followed through the Red Sea, another Iranian ship, also on the U.S. blacklist, also sailing at this point openly under the Iranian flag through Suez. Yeah, how are they doing that? What are they saying? Why is it okay for the Suez Canal authorities to do business with these U.S. blacklisted ships? That ship was coming from Bulgaria, another troubling destination if you're concerned about things like potential arms smuggling. So, yes, there's a de facto lifting of sanctions going on here, even as the administration says we're committed to enforcing sanctions, etc.
Is this the fleet that runs guns to the Houthis if the U.S. wasn't standing in the way?
Potentially, this is certainly a big part of it. These are Iranian ships. And Iran has used ships under other flags and of other owners for some of its smuggling, but right now its own fleet seems able to sail with an impunity it has not enjoyed in years. So do they lend themselves? Yes, they do.
Claudia, once upon a time, the Spanish War, it reminds me of a novel I read just recently about the Spanish War, when they bought anti-aircraft weapons and anti-aircraft shells from the Russians. They had to get them through the Black Sea, down the Dardanelles, across the Mediterranean to land in Spain. It was very dramatic, and in the novel, it's quite thrilling, because there are Italian submarines, there are German submarines, and then there are port inspections along in the Aegean. What you're telling me is none of that exists here in the 21st century. That was the antique and backward 1930s 1937, and we're much more modern than that. We just let you run guns without being stopped.
Yes, exactly. We can see it all, and apparently nothing gets done. So that's the scene right now. And, John, these are just two ships I called out to try and make the picture. There are a series, Iranian ships are sailing up and down through the Red Sea, through the Suez Canal, into the Mediterranean. There's regular traffic, including between Iran and Syria. So sanctions? What sanctions?
A final detail here. Thaddeus, is your sense, because I don't want to be too ironic here, we're watching the futility of sanctions. Is your sense that we should just stop concerning ourselves with the administration right now on Iran, that they have already made their decision, Thaddeus, that there's not an argument anymore? What's your sense of it, Thaddeus?
No, I think the administration has to be held to account. I think that they are undermining their own sanctions by a failure to enforce them. They swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I do think that's worth continuing to hold them accountable for. I think that people should be aware what's going to happen is this administration is going to say that the Iranians have capitulated, they've accepted the phase out of sanctions, the snapback provisions, and all the while cynically realizing there are no sanctions in place right now because they're not being enforced.
Claudia, the Azargun, it's headed back to Iran, and then we don't know what it'll carry. Does anybody ever inspect its cargo?
One would hope. We don't hear much about it. The same ship was in Taiwan earlier in the year. These are places that have been involved in smuggling, in very problematic things. There are cases right now, in fact, that have come through the U.S. courts I'm sorry to say, because I think Taiwan is terrific in many fronts. It's a Chinese democracy, but it has also been a place where there's been an awkwardly large amount of involvement in smuggling to do with North Korea's nuclear program and with Iranian proliferation. So again, John, we don't have hard evidence, in part because our own government tells us very little these days about this kind of thing. But that's another destination where you want to worry a little bit. This is a container ship. What is in those containers? And we don't actually know. When I ask Treasury and State what goes on, when I've asked about how do these ships get through Suez, they simply won't comment.
Claudia Rosett of Foundation for the Defense of Democracy is writing in Forbes.com. We have the story from 1937, and we'll wait. Claudia Rosett, Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. I'm John Batchelor.